So part of cell division for GCSE Biology. So mitosis is basically the concept that as organisms, eukaryotic organisms, we all need a continuous, like constant supply of new cells. So eukaryotic basically just means cells that have a nucleus, a distinct nucleus. I can't spell distinct. Nucleus like us humans. So the cells will have a distinct nucleus, and so all eukaryotic organisms, including humans, require a continuous supply of new cells. The key term is new cells. So there are two types of cells. There's diploid and haploid cells. Diploid cells are basically what we call the normal cells. So it's basically the cells where we have two copies of each chromosome, one coming from mom and one coming from the dad. So two pairs of each chromosome, one from mom and dad, and we're going to have 23 pairs of this, so a total of 46 chromosomes. Haploid cells are basically for gametes. So gametes are basically the scientific word for sex cells. So it's when you have 23. So gametes only have one copy. So there's no pairs for haploids. Sorry, there's only one chromosome, because one chromosome in one person, right? And then it's gonna combine with another one from either the mom or dad, and these will combine together to create these diploid cells. So these haploid cells only have one pair. There is no pairs actually, and it's just one chromosome. So 23 chromosomes in total, because it's going to combine with another 23 from from the other parent to create a total of 46 chromosomes, like in diploid cells. So for mitosis, so for the division of cells that we're looking at today, it's going to be for diploid cells. And you'll see why as we go and explain what mitosis is, and at the end we'll look back and see if you understand. So how exactly does cell division work? Well, you need to understand what mitosis is for first. Mitosis, right? So the division of cells. It's the normal cell division involving body cells. So it's used for growth and repair. So for example, when we have skin cells, right? And you get injured. So imagine this is your arm and you have like a tear on it, like you got a scratch. Well, these skin cells are going to divide, so it's going to create new skin cells to fill up the damaged ones so that no infections can enter the body, right? That's what basically mitosis partly does. It's growth and repair of dead cells. Asexual reproduction and cloning. So when you reproduce sexually, you're going to do meiosis, which is for haploid cells, where you have 23 chromosomes, no pairs. But for asexual reproduction, all the chromosomes have to come from yourself, right? Remember, asexual is when you reproduce with yourself. So, for example, in plants, some plants. So, asexual reproduction and cloning, because as we go on, you'll see that mitosis just basically clones the genes, clones the cells. So, it'll create identical copies, and it's also used for producing identical diploid cells. Produces. This is the key point. Identical diploid cells. So diploid cells, remember, it's when you have pairs of these chromosomes. So it produces identical diploid cells, which are just the normal body cells. So it's going to create 46. We're going to have 46 chromosomes in total in one cell. And this is formed with 23 pairs. So each pair will have 2 chromosomes, forming 46 in total per cell. And yeah, that's pretty much the basic overview of what mitosis does, so the purpose of mitosis. Alright, so all eukaryotic organisms, we all require a continuous supply of new cells, right? And these new cells are used for a couple of functions. It's used for growth, development, and repair. So these are, it's really important, especially for like younger people, so for like babies. Because babies or like teenagers, they still grow, right? You're still growing taller, you're getting like muscles, etc. So it's really important for young organisms, not just in humans, but also other organisms. For like example, baby cats, they also grow, right? So it's really important because they need to grow in size. So really important for the younger ones. But also it's really important for older organisms too. So imagine you're a fully grown adult or old grandpa. You would still need cell division and mitosis, because you need to constantly replace those lost cells. So skin cells, they just fall off our bodies as they age and die. So we're gonna have to replace them with new skin cells through the method of mitosis, creating new cells through cell division. So The process of doing this is called the cell cycle. The process where new cells are generated, this is called the cell cycle. It's basically the life cycle of cells. And for this, there are three main stages in the life cycle of cells. Firstly, you have the growth part. So the cells need to grow. And then they have DNA replication. So their DNA is replicated. So that's a fancy word for saying the DNA is copied. Exact copy of a DNA is made, like with a photocopier. DNA is replicated, and then mitosis occurs. We'll look at how this works exactly in just a moment. And then this cell gets divided, so it's the division, into two new cells. And this process, the fancy word for this is cytokinesis. It's good to know the word, but it's not completely necessary. So the last part is division, where cytokinesis happens. Okay, so let's look at the growth section first. Stage 1, the growth part. The cell grows in size. So it's basically just the cell growing. So this is looking at after the cell has split into two new cells, right? First it needs to grow, and then we'll look at how this division part happens afterwards. So the growth, once a new cell is made, right, it needs to grow in size. So the cell grows in size, and when this happens, it increases the number of subcellular structures. Number of subcellular structures increases. By that I mean subcellular structures, right? What are subcellular structures? It's like mitochondria and ribosomes, etc. So the number of subcellular structures increase. So basically the size of the cell increases, and obviously the things within it are also going to have to increase, right? Then we have the second part. The growth part is pretty easy, and it's not really part of cell division. It's just the basic content that you will have to know. Then we have DNA replication. Replication is basically the DNA getting duplicated. It's getting photocopied. So you're getting an identical copy of the DNA in one cell so that you can split it into two new full sets. So two new cells will have a full set of DNA, right? So it's when you have the DNA in one cell, right? So you have a bunch of DNA. This needs to get photocopied. So you're going to have this and then another one of this so that you can have two in one cell. And then this will eventually end up splitting, which we'll look at in just a second. That's DNA replication. Up to here, it's easy. There's not really much content to know. It's just the DNA gets duplicated so that it can divide. And it's important to note that a cell spends the majority of its time growing and preparing for cell division. So the majority of the life of cells is spent growing, so getting bigger and increasing the number of its subcellular structures. And it also spends its time preparing for, I feel like spur don't right? Prepare. Anyways, preparing. So it's preparing for cell division. So like 80 to 90% of the life of a cell is spent just growing and preparing for cell division. That's the majority of a life of a cell. It's only like the last 10 or 20% of it that it spends doing cell division, so dividing into two new cells. And cell division, it takes a very short period of time. And this period of time where the cell just grows and prepares, it's called the interphase. So the part where it spends 80 to 90% of its life of a cell growing and preparing for cell division, it's called the interphase. And then you finally enter the last part, cell division. So when a cell is not dividing, so in its interphase state, I'm going to draw a really poor diagram of a cell, and here we'll have the nucleus, right? If we zoom in into the nucleus, you'll see that when it's not dividing, it'll just have long strands of DNA. Like so, DNA is spread out into these long strings. Kind of looks like a spaghetti bowl, right? So it's just split up like so. But when it's preparing for division, these strands of DNA, right? So when it's preparing for division, these strands of DNA, so nucleus again. Remember, the cell is stored in the nucleus. This is for eukaryotic cells, by the way, because other cells, so prokaryotes that don't have a distinct nucleus don't do this. So the nucleus, right? It turns into the long strands that we had before, right? They form chromosomes. And they form pairs of chromosomes. And because we know we're talking about mitosis, right? It involves diploid cells where you have double strands, like two of each type, one from the mom and one from the dad. So it forms these sort of double of each type, and these are called chromosomes. Chromosomes. Now the concept of chromosomes might be a bit confusing. You used to have a bunch of these strands, right? So each chromosome, within it, you'll have these DNA strands tightly coiled into it. It's kind of like a ball of threads, right? The strings are just like coiled tightly together. And within it, different parts will code for different sections. This is kind of like the process for protein synthesis. Look at that if you don't know it. That'll explain what chromosomes really are in more detail. But anyways, the random spaghetti bowl of DNA that we used to have forms chromosomes. And remember, in humans, we have 23 pairs. So 46 individual chromosomes in total. It's kind of like a pairs of socks. If you have 23 pairs of socks, you're going to have 46 individual socks in total. So 46 individual chromosomes. And then what happens is the eukaryote, two pairs, and one comes from the mom and one comes from the dad. So other species have different numbers of chromosomes. So imagine an elephant, right? It might have 100 pairs of chromosomes. I don't know. That's not a factual. I made that up. But the point is that us humans and different organisms have different numbers of chromosomes. And that's why we can't reproduce together with, say, an elephant, because we have different numbers of chromosomes in total. And that's why we can't produce fertile offspring, so you can't conceive babies with an elephant and have an elephant-human hybrid. That's just not possible. So, and then what happens is the cell duplicates these 46 chromosomes. So in our cell, right, nucleus, we used to have 46 pairs of chromosomes, one from the dad and one from the mom, right? So imagine this goes on 23 times. 23 pairs, 46 in total. And this would be from the mom, and this would be from the dad. So 46 in total, right? Then the cell duplicates all 46 of these chromosomes. So it needs to duplicate them so that it can split them in half, right? So what happens is when you had these chromosomes, right? One from the dad, one from the mom. Well, we're going to take one of these chromosomes. Oh, that was a really poor drawing. Let me draw that again. You're going to take one of these chromosomes, and then you're going to make an identical copy of it. So another copy. And it's going to form a sort of an X shape. This will be the original, and this will be the duplicate. Now we like to code or color the duplicate in green, just to show that that is the duplicate of the original cell. So this would be the duplicate, and this would be the original cell that we had. And this would happen for all 46 of these. So if this was the duplicate of the mom's one, we'd have another duplicate of the dad's one. And we'd color the duplicate in green. And then for another chromosome, we'll take the mom's one this time, and then we'll have another duplicate of it, and that'll be in green. Anyways, the point is, all 46 chromosomes in humans will be duplicated, and it'll form this sort of X-shaped structure. The left side will have the original cell, and the right side will have the exact copy. So the two of these will be identical. It's because it's like an identical, like photocopied version of the real version. So they're going to be identical. And we often refer to this as the left arm and the right arm. Kind of use arms. I don't know why we use arms, but we refer to them as the left and right arm. And both the left and right arms will have identical DNAs because they're identical copies of each other. And since we have 46 chromosomes, we would get 46 of these X shapes, because each of the 46 chromosomes that we used to have, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 we have here. We're going to get 6 of these X shapes, but this would happen for all 46. We're going to get all 46 of these X shapes. Then what will happen is that we're going to get 46 of these X shapes, right? And then it's going to go into the cell, right? This is happening within a cell. So imagine this is the nucleus. Not the nucleus, the cell, sorry. Once the cell is ready to divide, so in the division state, once it's in the division state, the cells will line up. So all 46 of these X shapes, right? Like so. We're going to get 46 of these all lining up in the center of the cell. Now, obviously here I only drew 4 because I ran out of space, but in reality, this is going to continue for the entirety of the cell. 46 of these X shapes will line up. That'll mean we'll have a total of 46 times 2, so 92 chromosomes in total, right? But anyways, we'll have 46 of these X shapes. And it'll be 46 chromosomes, but it'll have copies of each other, so 92 in total, but it'll really be 46 chromosomes itself. And the division part is that once it's ready to divide, they all line up, right? At the center of the cell. And we have these things called cell fibers. These, I'll draw them with dashes. These are like the cell fibers. And what these cell fibers do is that they pull each side of the chromosome to their respective sides. So these are called cell fibers. And the fibers from each side attach to their respective half of the chromosome. So what we call each side is called the pole. It's kind of like the north and south pole in magnets, right? We call each side of the cell poles. And so a pole from this side will have cell fibers, and they'll pull this one all the way here. Another one will pull this one all the way here. This one, this one. Another cell fiber from the right side will pull it to the right pole, like so. And this will happen for all 46 chromosomes, and because each X is comprised of identical copies of each other, right? Once these go to their respective sides, so this one will go to the left, and this will go to the right side of the cell, right? And then so on and so forth. So this one will go to the left, this goes to the right. The cell, this will split in half, right? These X chromosomes. And it'll be identical. The left side will have identical chromosomes to the right side of the chromosome. And so this breaks the chromosomes in half and happens to all 46, leaving each side with 46 of these chromosomes. Because remember, we had 46 X shapes, but these X shapes have two identical copies of each, right? So if it splits in half, you're going to get 46 on both sides. And that will happen, so each side will have 46 chromosomes. Now just take a brief break and explain the concept of these chromosomes. So the concept of chromosomes might be confusing because this is a chromosome, right? Humans have 46 of these. And we have pairs of each from mom and dad, but each of them are called chromosomes. But we also call the X shape that's formed also chromosomes. And then lastly, once it divides, it also forms chromosomes. So the term might really be confusing. But these identical halves, right? The entire X shape is called a chromosome, but each half is called a chromatid. Now, you don't need to know the meaning of chromatid or even the word chromatid itself, but it just helps to understand. So chromosomes, chromosomes. Because this X shape, right, it's just a copy of one chromosome into both sides. So these are all just chromosomes. And each half of the X is called a chromatid. This is not a chromatid, this is just a chromosome. Anyways, what happens is the cell breaks in half. The chromosomes break in half, leaving each side with 46 individual chromosomes. And then lastly, once all genetic material has been divided among the two sides, we get the process of cytokinesis. Cytokinesis. So basically cell division. The actual cell is going to be dividing into half. So when you have this with chromosomes on both sides, right? The X shape divided into half. Well, now this thing is going to split in half. And then it's going to leave one side with all these chromosomes and another side with all these chromosomes. So the cell membrane and cytoplasm pull apart. This is really important. Cell membrane and cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm is basically the liquid filling up cells, and cell membrane is kind of like the wall around the cell. Pull apart, forming two new daughter cells. Now just don't get confused with this daughter cell topic, because it's not this one making two new daughter cells. It's this one splitting apart into two new daughter cells. So this thing will not exist anymore. It's split it into half. That's why we replicated it, so that we'd have identical copies of the original parent cell. And there's no son cell. It's just daughter cell. I don't know why, but it's daughter cell. And it splits apart into two new daughter cells. And each cell has the same DNA, because remember, we copied the same genes into the X shape, right? So each cell, each of the daughter cells will have identical DNA, and therefore they'll be identical to each other and to the parent they came from, because, well, they kind of came from themselves, but yeah. So they'll be identical to each other. And this will now contribute to growth, development, and repair of us. So when we grow, the cells don't actually increase individually. The number of cells increases. That's why we grow. And then this cycle will repeat all over again. Continuously, the cells will continue to divide and then replicate and grow. And so the process will also happen for the new daughter cells again. I just want to go over the topic of mitosis versus cytokinesis. I talked about cytokinesis when the cell actually split in half to create the two daughter cells. And mitosis, well, mitosis is when the cell copies the genetic material. So when you had these chromosomes, right, these pairs of chromosomes, when you copy them into two identical sets forming the X shape, that's the part that is mitosis, the copying of cells to create this X shape. Cytokinesis is when the cell physically splits in two with the cytoplasm and the cell membrane pulling apart, right? That's cytokinesis, each with their own complete set of instructions, allowing the body to grow and repair itself. So in summary, mitosis is the copying and dividing of the genetic material. So when you copy the chromosomes into the X, and then the shapes go into each side of the cell. And cytokinesis is when this physically splits into two, with the cell membrane and the cytoplasm pulling apart, creating two new daughter cells. So this process continuously happens, and the reason, now you should know, diploid versus haploid, why we need diploid, is because we copy each of these pairs of 23 chromosomes, and we make the X shape. And that is pretty much mitosis. And then the only thing left is meiosis, which is mainly for gametes and sex cells.